Okay, you go ahead.
Okay, got it. So Karen Hunter is a connector, a planner, a strategist. She has over 30 years of experience working both with corporations and as an entrepreneur. She's worked with really large companies, Coca-Cola, um, FanDuel, Unilever, and she's also a board member and board president of Synergy's Work. So we'd like to welcome her and allow her to do her introduction. Just briefly beforehand, for those of us who need some extra support, if you could do a visual introduction for yourself as well. So let's get started.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today. Synergy's Work is one of my favorite organizations, and Arthi is one of my favorite people and one of my favorite network connections. It's really interesting because I've known Arthi for a long time, and I've known this program for a long time. And when she and Shlok and Paolo came to me and said, "Are you interested in speaking? And what would you like to speak about?" One of the things I thought about was, what are the places where I see entrepreneurs really struggle? What are the things that I've seen entrepreneurs that I've worked with feel like they really need help with? And one of my sources is I've been a mentor at a couple of tech incubators and also teach at Georgia State. And networking is always one of those things that people felt like they needed to have just a little more confidence in, a little more understanding of how do you even think about networking? What is networking about? So I'm gonna share my screen. And can someone tell me if you see networking for startups?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So I love this topic of networking, particularly when it comes to talking to startups. And the reason is because of the importance of networks for startups. So as a follow-up for the introduction, and thank you so much, Paolo. So I'm from Atlanta. I've lived in a lot of other places. I graduated from Georgia State. I have an undergrad and a graduate degree from Georgia State, and I have worked for a lot of big corporations and some consulting organizations. And I was an entrepreneur myself. I've had my own consulting business where I was selling myself and I was selling my own services. And so my expertise sits really in the innovation process and strategy space. But I've also been a mentor at Techstars and at Boomtown Accelerator, where there are true entrepreneurs who come in. And I've been a professor at Georgia State teaching design thinking for entrepreneurs. And in that design thinking class, so many of my students are really struggling with, how do I build my network? And so one of the things that I really love doing is just connecting dots between people. And Arthi knows this. Every time I talk to her, I'm like, well, you know, I just talked to this person, you should talk to that person. And I really love helping people connect dots. And so I want to start out by thinking about exactly what is networking. And I'd like to invite people in the chat just to drop into chat. What do you think networking is? And for some reason, I cannot see the chat. So Paolo, can you help me to see, is there anything?
Sure thing. So I'm looking at the chat right now. Nothing's come in as of yet. Maybe we can share verbally. I know for me, it's easier to share verbally. So I'm just going to say, oh, Kathy says sharing what you're doing with others. Right on, Kathy. Kimberly, I think it's just getting to know people like you.
Yes. Yep.
Janice says creating a mutual beneficial relationship. And I also think it's about building relationships and just sharing what you're doing, your wins and your struggles.
That's absolutely right. It really is, it's three things. It's about making those connections, and they are usually, you think about networking when it comes to professional connections, but sometimes they're professional, but they bridge into personal connections or even to friendships. But it's about building those relationships with the people who you feel like can help you advance your career, advance your goals, and exchanging ideas. So thinking about what is it that you and the person with whom you're networking have either in common, or what is a problem that you could potentially help them with? What is a problem that you need their help with? So it's really nothing more complicated than building up those relationships. So once you understand what is it you want to get out of the network, you want to think about, why would you actually want to network? What are the reasons you might want to network with other people? And I'll do the same, make the same ask. Getting your brand out there is a perfect one. That's a really, really good one, Tiona. Thank you. Why else would you want to network? What are the other reasons? Learning how to, yes, to learn. Yeah, absolutely.
I think something else that was taught to me in schools was the way you build leads, you build opportunities is through your network.
That's absolutely right. And it's interesting, Paolo. I always use this phrase, 6 degrees of opportunity. So, oh, absolutely. To not build a business in isolation. That is a really, really important one. Because you do have things like you've got these new business opportunities that you can build out, learning from each other, and getting advice and two-way mentoring. But sometimes it's just about creating goodwill in your community and building up. And this kind of goes to building your personal brand. It's also, and this is one that I had to learn, was understanding, where do you fit and what are your qualifications versus others? So really understanding, what is it that I might be missing? What do I need to be learning? Or what do I need to be thinking about that I'm not thinking about, that you could then use idea exchanges to help build up? And just in general, expanding your community. And one of the things as an entrepreneur that I have struggled with is the loneliness of being an entrepreneur. Sometimes you are making all the decisions. You're in there by yourself and you're in your head. Am I making the right decision? Am I doing things the right way? What else should I be thinking about that I'm not thinking about? It's exhausting. And so your network can often be those people who you can just use as formal and informal advisors to help you further your ideas and be that sort of counsel and community. I have 2 women who are my sort of advisory council, and twice a year we get together for a full day and we do personal career planning. What are our business goals? What are the challenges we're trying to overcome? And we map out what is the next 6 months going to look like for us. And it gives us an opportunity to really challenge each other. Are we thinking broadly enough? Are we being expansive enough? And then when I have issues or I have problems, I can text either one of them at any time with just quick questions. Hey, how would you handle this situation? I can't tell you the number of times I've been on a call at 7 o'clock in the morning with one of them because we have a 9 o'clock meeting and we need to know how to approach a difficult conversation, or we feel like we're stretched too thin and we just need that reassurance that we're going to be okay. So those are some things to think about around how do you use your network and what can that network do? And it's often people who are your peers, not even someone who's necessarily a mentor, but you can often think about your peers in that way.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I've always tried to do planning, but I've always done it on my own. You know, it's a book and a calendar, and I've never really included anyone else in it. So it's a different way of doing things, a perspective shift. I think I'm going to try that out next time around.
And particularly if you have people who are sort of in the same career phase and do similar, not exactly the same kind of work, but who might be an entrepreneur who might have similar goals, they can really help you to think about how might you do things differently. Sometimes it was interesting in our last planning session, one of the women, we asked her what her goals were. So she talked about her goals. And then we asked her what kinds of business opportunities she was going after. And she started talking about the business opportunities. And there was a complete mismatch between her goals and the types of business that she was going after. And it was the first time she had articulated those two at the same time. And it was a big aha moment for her. And so we helped her to recraft some of her goals, because she was going after the business that she wanted to, but I think her goals were not aligned.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Talking about building a community, I think part of the reason that Learning Hub that we have created, Karen, I don't know if you've had a chance to review it, but it is to bring in entrepreneurs and talk to each other, because sometimes the collective knowledge that exists between people, as you know, as you said, talking to your peers is also as important as talking to your mentors.
Yeah.
Because everybody's going through a similar crisis.
Well, and it's interesting. So I'll Arthur, if it's okay, I'd like to share a little bit of our journey.
Yes, please.
So I met Arthi through her husband, who I worked with. We met at a company dinner. We had a conversation, and I think we just enjoyed the dialogue. And we said we should continue this discussion. And so we ended up having lunch a few weeks later. And during the lunch, we talked more about the overlaps and the connections that we had. And I introduced her to a couple of people in my network. And, one of them was Jeff Hillemeyer, who
yes, continues to be like a big influence.
Yes. But it was, neither of us came in with any kind of agenda.
Yes.
I think we were just interested in what each other had to say, and we wanted to get to know each other better. And I've had plenty of coffees with people who I just thought, what, this is a really interesting conversation. Can we expand on this? And sometimes those conversations go on and on and on, and sometimes that's where they end. So don't feel pressure to continually have conversations that you don't feel are fruitful, but make sure that you're putting the effort and the work into getting to know people and really to understand what's the mutual beneficial actions that you can bring to each other.
In fact, Karen, if I might add, I think, yes, our relationship was only grown. And I always think that maybe part of networking it has got a bad rep, but networking is all about cultivating relationships, really. It requires nurturing.
Yes. And that's another really, really good point.
I think that the approach, having it, be more focused on the relationship other than, what can this person do for me right now? Or what, if I need this person for a sale or for information. It doesn't necessarily have to be directly that. It has to be more about, you know, who is this person? What have they learned? How can I nurture them?
Paula, that is absolutely right. Because when you think about a sales relationship, that's very transactional. I meet you, I sell you something, you buy something, and that's sort of the end of it. And I often think about who are the connections in my life who can help me grow as a person, who can help me grow professionally, who can help advise me when I have things that I need to talk about as far as my business. When I teach, I often tap into my network to lecture because those subject matter experts are really, really interesting. So it is thinking about what's the long-term vision. I have people that I met 2-3 years ago. I would have coffee with them and I might not talk to them for a year, but about every year I'll come back and be like, hey, just wanted to say hello, see how things were going, just touching base. And it's amazing how often those become yet another conversation, and then it sort of sparks something different. And there are tons and tons of ways to networking. And I think the bad rap that networking gets is the classic business networking event where you go and you stand around awkwardly and you have your business cards and you're trying to make chit chat, and it's the worst. And I am a horrible introvert. So those kinds of experiences are really, really hard for me. But there are lots of other really great ways to network. I mean, certainly you can go to either in-person events or virtual events, but LinkedIn is a really, really great way for me. And I have a lot of different ways that I like to network on LinkedIn. Meetup, so meetup.com is a great way to network. There are lots of professional communities or communities of interest that can get you into certain spaces. I'm part of a meetup that is a small fiction writer group. I've also done meetups for product development. I've done meetups for researchers. So they're all different ways to think about meetups. Co-working spaces can be great for those who want to work in a different environment. It's just a good way to go and sort of shake your space up, but then also you can create conversations with the people in those rooms. This idea of a cold introduction with a purpose, and this goes back to it could be LinkedIn, but it could also just be I met someone at meet someone at an event, or I see someone out in the media. I emailed. I was working on a project about mattress brands, and I read a book about sleep, and I thought that what the author said was really, really interesting, and his email address was in the book. And so I emailed him and said, I just read your book. It's really fantastic. I have these 3 questions. And he emailed me back and we had a little dialogue back and forth, and it was really kind of amazing. But I was very intentional about, I didn't just email him and say, I loved your book, or I just wanted to meet you. I came in with some very clear questions that sparked a dialogue. Community events are another great way to network. And again, you want to be mindful of what is the event. So Synergies Works obviously has events, but there are things like if your neighborhood, honestly, like our neighborhood has block parties on a regular basis. And I've discovered that 2 of my neighbors are entrepreneurs. And so we chat periodically about how entrepreneurs live and how we can help each other out. And so those are really interesting ideas. Business events, obviously, internal company events. So if you work for a company or if you're connected to a company, going to the events that that they might put on for classes or even for internal networking. Classes are another great way, particularly I've done a lot of writing classes. I've done some classes on digital intelligence, but you can find all kinds of classes that connect you with people who have common interests. So if you love making things, can you find another group of people who make the same kinds of things you do? If you're a potter, if you're a painter, if you're a baker, finding those different kinds of places to connect, and that can be a great way to build your network out, because they're people who have similar passions to you. The recognizing authors, this is like the author of the book, but it's also if you see authors in newspapers or posts in LinkedIn or blog posts, getting more connected to those kinds of people. There is an amazing guy named David Bland, who's written a bunch of books on innovation that I just geek out over. And so I emailed him cold when I first started teaching and said, would you mind coming and presenting to one of your ideas to my class? And he was like, I'd be happy to. And he was wonderful. And I think it was also very flattering for him that, hey, I loved your work enough, I want to share it. And oh, by the way, we're all going to buy your book. So
That's awesome.
it was really, really nice. And then just problem solving, but also very, very specific problem solving. And again, for entrepreneurs, there are so many wonderful resources for entrepreneurs, particularly in the Southeast. There's Techstars, there's Boomtown Accelerators, there's Main Street, there's Goody Nation. There are all kinds of different places, particularly for entrepreneurs, and to be able to connect into those networks are going to be really, really powerful and really incredible. And so many of those kinds of networks, particularly within the entrepreneur community, are really, really important because they are the people who can connect you to things like funding and other resources. Most of the entrepreneurs I know have hired their teams through their networks, and the relationships that they built and the references they've gotten from their networks have been where they have found the best sets of resources. What other ways can people think about that you might network? What are other places?
Just really quickly, I had a question, and I think you might have some insight that would help me. Whenever I try to do an in-person event, whether that's classes or meetups or book clubs, interest-based things, I face an interesting barrier. A lot of times because, I am a wheelchair user, because my disability is very apparent, there is this barrier. Sometimes it can be one of two things. People are either, very standoffish, like almost to the point of not acknowledging that I'm there, or it can be, it's terrible to say, but it's almost condescending. It's like, oh, I'm so happy you're here. It's great to see you. And I have no idea who this person is, or, we've never met. So I have a difficult time establishing competence or establishing in those situations. Can you speak to a little bit about that?
I think it's a really great point. And particularly, I think for someone, again, who presents with a very obvious difference from other people in the room, because two people do tend to gravitate towards people who are like them. The things, so it's interesting. Because one of the things that and I'll talk about this in a minute, one of the things that I always try to do is I try to go into every conversation. I try to go in with a couple of small goals. And so there's a little bit that's on you, and then there's a lot that's on the people there. So if your goals are, I just want to meet 2 new people. So really think about what is it that you want to get out of that time networking, and what is your personal story? How would you get engaged? And it's interesting because I have been in networking situations with people who are in wheelchairs who become the center of the universe just because they strike up the dialogue. I think it's because networking and because sometimes meeting new people is hard for anyone. It isn't just for people with disabilities. It's a little extra work to go in with, here's my story, here's why it's important that people should meet me. So come in with that attitude of, I'm important for people to get to know, because these are the things that I'm going to bring to the table. And then come in with 2 or 3 sort of conversation starters that are not about your disability, but that are about what you bring to the table, unless your disability is part of what you want to bring.
If I might just jump in, Karen, here, I want to share something. So earlier I think in September, we were invited to the Clinton Global Initiative in New York City. So there was this gentleman also who was in a wheelchair. And it's interesting, because of ADA, he got to go right in front of the first opening session where Bill Clinton was speaking. And there he met somebody from Mexico City. He's from Mexico. So they got talking, and interestingly, because of his wheelchair access to the front, he got to go backstage with this celebrity who was from Mexico. And he had a 15-minute conversation with Bill Clinton, got his photographs taken, and the reason why he was there at the initiative. So there it was, taking a situation and making it run with it. And we were so envious of him. I said, because of that wheelchair, you got to go there, and you got that photograph. And he ran with that thing. So sometimes I think, yes, as you said, it's very uncomfortable for everybody to go into a space and introduce themselves. And person like you and I, and we are, I learned a lot that in a place like that, where everybody's coming with the purpose of networking, it's okay to stand at the door with the clear intention that I only have 1 minute, and I'm going to exchange these cards and make sure if you're interested or not interested. If not, okay, fine, it's okay, we get on. So that was a different experience altogether of networking that I'd ever seen. But I learned that, yeah, that's the way you need to network, then you need a network. So it was exciting to see that.
It's interesting because I don't know if I would know how to start a conversation with Bill Clinton. I think I would be.
Neither would I, believe me, but this gentleman did it, and he did it so well. He got 15 minutes clear conversation one-on-one with them.
Yeah. But I also think, like, in small networking situations, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, God, these things are so awkward. Who have you talked to? Have you met anybody? Like, just like put it out there that, this is a weird situation and I don't really know anybody. And, maybe find an ally, find someone, sometimes it's helpful to find somebody else who's standing off to the side and striking up a conversation with them, and then you become a cluster, and then you can add people to that cluster. And I sometimes find that is very, very gratifying, because those are people who want to be there. They are there for networking, and they're probably just as uncomfortable.
Yeah, I do that all the time. Find another lovely soul.
So that's kind of an interesting strategy for someone who maybe hasn't been to an in-person event. I've been to a few, but it's always good to know, that's a great tip, find an ally, become a cluster. And as a cluster, there's kind of safety in numbers, and there's different things you can pull into a conversation. I know I do try my best to like work a room and not stay in like one corner the whole time. Anything else from your bag of tricks that you'd recommend?
So Paula, one thing I do just in social situations is, if you can drag somebody with you, it always makes it much easier, because you'll have somebody that you can retreat to. Like, hey, this is becoming too much. Let me go talk to the person I already know.
That's good.
Yeah, that's always a great situation to at least, invite someone else to go. Kimberly, I love your thoughts about Toastmaster and church too, because those are two amazing, like Toastmasters particularly, like those, that's a great place.
Yes, and I learned that from Synergy Works. That was one of my to do things to get my confidence up, and it has been working. It has been really working.
Yes.
Yeah.
And church is also a really interesting one, because you're going to meet people who have the same sort of moral compass that you do. And so that often makes those communications a lot easier.
Yeah.
And when we think about, again, like going into a room where you may not know anybody, you're there for networking, you are there for a purpose. And you may be there to, if you go in saying, I want to find somebody who I can potentially have as a mentor, that's a great conversation starter to say, again, to approach someone and say, hey, I'm here, I'm looking for someone who might be able to mentor me in this space. Do you happen to know anybody who really does a great job there, or that you really admire who does that kind of thing? And just really getting people to open up about themselves. If you can ask people about their own experiences, everyone loves talking about themselves. So finding, again, what are those 2 or 3 questions that get people really excited about talking about themselves and feel like they're really connected to you. And I have seen and have no problem personally, like if I'm in a conversation with someone and I feel like it's kind of not going anywhere, or they're not really, or they're just trying to sell me something, which is just the worst. I have absolutely no problem with saying, hey, it's been lovely talking with you. I'm going to go join my colleagues over here, and just excusing yourself and moving on to another group. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
I have a hello. I'm sorry, I came in a little bit late. My name's Maria. I have a question regarding networking with people from a different generation than yourself. It's one thing talking from peer to peer when you can find common ground, but I think it's another thing when you're the youngest in the room and you don't really have as many commonalities. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and that's, I think, a really important one, because the dynamics are very different in those kinds of rooms. And that can be a great opportunity to say, hey, I'm early in my career. I'm curious to know how you've been able to build your career. What's some good advice that you've gotten? What are books that you're reading that you might think about recommending? So just opening up some of those opportunities for them to talk about ways that their experiences could potentially help you. But those can be much more intimidating because sometimes those situations you do feel like I may not have the right to be in this room. You feel like you have a little imposter syndrome going.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think to come in with the mind of a student, the mind of someone who, I'm here to absorb all this information, all this great learning from all these people who have so much more experience than me. And again, just being really, really open about, I'm here because I heard that there are a lot of people who have really, really great expertise in this area here. Talk to me about your experience in that area. And so really, one, recognizing that you see that person as an expert, and then two, giving them an opportunity to talk about themselves, which again, everyone loves to do. It is really difficult. And I still find myself, going in a room and sort of looking around, but I always go in with at least 2 or 3 questions in mind in any new situation that will at least be conversation starters, no matter what the space is. Are you reading anything interesting lately, or watching or listening to any podcasts is always a really good one. Generally, everyone has something that they're either reading or listening to. At the moment, I feel like what are the things that you're doing that you really missed doing in the past 2 years is a really good conversation starter. A lot of people are now starting to get out for the first time. And how did you get started in your career? What was your first job? I love that question myself because it gets people to reflect back on the early years, and asking that question will often get them to think about how, I know when people ask me about that, it makes me think about how can what I experienced help you learn something more. So even asking somebody like, what was your first job and how did you get to where you are, can be really, really powerful.
Another good way is to start off by complimenting an individual. People, if it's a tense approach, or, you're apprehensive about something, if you compliment that individual, you'll see them light up and they'll begin to speak. Yeah.
You are absolutely correct. I don't do this as much with men, but I tell a lot of women that I like their shoes.
Mhm.
Karen, you should do it with men. If you tell any man that you like their shoes, they're gonna light up way more than any woman you've ever seen. I guarantee you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Karen, that is true, because my best friend, who is now my sister, 25 years ago, I complimented her shoes in church, and we became best friends, sisters to the end. So that is so true. That
Yes.
is so true. Yeah.
And it's relatively harmless,
Yeah.
it's hard to take, but that really, I think that's a really, really great suggestion, the complimenting, because
Yeah.
who doesn't love a compliment? It feels like it, particularly if it's from a very genuine place. I think that's a really great way to think about how do you get yourself into a discussion. And I do love this idea again of find someone, either someone who's off by themselves or maybe just 2 people. There's this idea of donuts and croissants in networking events. So donuts are when you've got a little cluster of people that are in a circle, it's hard to get into the donut. But if someone is a croissant and they've got sort of like there's an opening on the side, you can sort of physically get in on the side and join the conversation. And so as you are starting conversations with other people, try to think about how do you become a croissant, and so that you're opening your conversation group to other people instead of being a donut and kind of keeping it closed off.
Yeah.
Not that everyone doesn't love a good donut, but sometimes it's good to be a croissant.
You know, one other thing, Karen, I was reflecting what you talked about vulnerability and what Paula mentioned about people being condescending and sometimes, you know, not including. I, on the other hand, have found that sometimes just being who you are in the room and sharing your story very matter-of-factly has found me more allies than, you know, yeah, there'll be always be some who don't understand, which is okay, that's the world. But then it allows others to also be vulnerable, because there are certain topics like disability which are so still have a difficulty in talking because you think, oh my God, you're less than, or ableistic views. But if you put it out as your who you are, because you are disabled, or that makes me who I am, then
Yeah.
other people feel comfortable enough to share what they know, if you know, and you can build those strengths. So for me, that has been a go-to, and I found so many people have come back and talked to me about that. It's a connecting point for me.
I love that. And also just having the ability to share what your disability is, but how, you know, can you make that into your superpower? Can you make that into your, the thing that you find most interesting about yourself?
Yes. Yeah, you said it right. It
Um,
is. It is who it makes you who you are. That's the essence.
Yes. Yeah. And you happen to be a business owner or an entrepreneur who has a disability, just like I was an entrepreneur who has red hair, or, you know, my husband is an entrepreneur who drives a pickup truck, or it is an aspect. It isn't the only aspect, but people will be curious, especially if it's a disability that's presented. And I don't know every single dimension, but sometimes it might be better just to, you know, let's put the elephant out on the table and let people ask the questions they want to ask, and make sure that it isn't the thing that people walk away saying, oh, I talked to that person with the disability. You want them to walk away saying, I talked to that person who's that great entrepreneur idea. And so think about, like, how do you want to define yourself? What's your personal brand? And what is the story? What's the narrative that you want people to walk away with from your networking?
And
Thank
Karen, just
you.
add one thing. I think like having that defined as like a quick elevator pitch to where you just have it, you know, you can rattle it off instantly. That'll remove a lot of that tension that, you know, hey, once I compliment them, they accept the compliment. I can introduce myself just saying these words, and then you're in.
Yes, I think that's perfect, Shlogan. It is hard. Like, it took me a long time to define what, like, myself in a professional situation. But now I can tell people I'm an entrepreneur who helps corporations to refine their innovation skills and processes in order to drive growth. And that's my 30 seconds. And then if people are interested in any of those dimensions, then we can move with that conversation. But it took me a while to get to that narrative, and it took some practice and it took some time, and I really had to put some deliberate effort into it. So, carve out some time, it may not happen in a day, but just start writing down, what do you want people to walk away saying about you? And then how do you start to build that story so that becomes your story instead of the one that they create about you?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
we-
one thing
And-
that
and-
I know.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I know the folks who've been through our TWI program, one thing we
Yes.
make them do is they introduce themselves at the beginning of every session. So at the end, they've done it 10 times, and by then they would have gotten that pitch down pretty well. So I'm sure like Kimberly and Paula and Daniel, you all can do a pretty good job with that.
And the
Oh,
reason
Yeah,
why
we
they do
get
that,
drilled into our brains to try that out, Shalok. I remember that.
yeah, and the reason why you're able to do that is actually going back to your personal purpose and then your business purpose. So if you don't have that in line, that elevator pitch will remain just words otherwise.
Yes.
And we've talked a lot about introductions. Can you speak to us a little bit about closings and follow up? Let's say you had this great conversation. You know that you want it to lead somewhere. How do you close? And particularly, how do you close in a way that's memorable? You know, sometimes I feel like even if I have my business card, just handing it to someone, you know, that's not going to go anywhere. It's sort of like giving away my power. Because it's up to them now, right? So can you talk to us a little bit about that follow-up and how you...
Yeah, what I always love to do is, particularly if I've met someone who I think is interesting. And again, I'll go back to the conversation with Arthi. We walked away after our first meeting saying, hey, I really enjoyed that conversation. Could we follow up and have a coffee or another discussion? And so you're not setting up, you know, I need to form a relationship with you. It's, hey, I'd like to just have one more conversation with you. And I do, over the past 2 years, as many of us, I've done hundreds of 20 or 30-minute Zoom meetings where I come into the meeting with like a really specific, hey, these are the things I'd love to know more about you, or the thing that I feel like I could give to you. And so just creating that intentionality and then following up, but do it in a really authentic way. If you are just doing it because you think it's the socially acceptable thing to do, I wouldn't make the commitment that I'm gonna let's have coffee. You can certainly take a business card and say, let's stay in touch. You know, I'll be in touch if there's something of interest that comes up. But I always make an intention for what is my next step going to be with you, whether it's I'm going to follow up later or we're going to have coffee or a meeting in the next month. But it is that intentionality.
I just wanted to. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna introduce myself. I was a little late to the party. My name is Lamont McLeod, and I am a willpreneur. And again, my reason for being late is I am taking a driver's assessment. I'm a quadriplegic in a power wheelchair, and my driver's assessment was this morning. So it took a little longer than anticipated. Thank God it went really well. So I just wanted to jump in and say, hey, I'm Lamont McLeod. My apologies for being late. I am a willpreneur, and I'm looking forward to learning and growing with you all.
Hi, Lamont. I'm glad it went well this morning.
It did. It did.
So you'll be on the roads of Atlanta?
Yes. Yes. Look out for me soon in these streets of Atlanta.
But that's a great story. Like I don't know you, we haven't met before today. And so even like those kinds of introductions, like, oh man, it was a stressful day. I just went through my driver's test. It's really, really hard for me, but man, it went really well. It's a great introduction because it's a really personal, sort of cheerful story that people will, I think people would be interested to know. And that's just something interesting about yourself. I want to talk about just a few watchouts, and then I'm going to, and then I want to ask some questions, and then I need to pop just a couple of minutes early so I can prep for my next meeting. But a couple of things that I really recommend, and this is what I tell all of my entrepreneurial students, I recommend watching out for going in and just asking immediately for a favor or a job or a recommendation. Because particularly if it's someone you've just met, they don't know you at all. And I have a number of students who have asked me for references for jobs. And if I've only had them in 1 or 2 classes, I don't know them well enough. And so it's just something to be very mindful of, that is a gift that people give when they know someone pretty well. Also, just assuming that people are going to make introductions for you. Wait until they offer that up, or if you have someone very specific in mind and a reason you want that introduction. Hey, I saw you were connected. I saw on LinkedIn that you were connected to Jeff Hellemeyer, and he wrote one of my favorite books, The 5-Day Turnaround. I'd love to just talk to him about the book publishing business. That's a good reason for an introduction, but just like, hey, can you introduce me to everyone in your network? Again, you need to build that relationship first. Going into any networking event without a goal or agenda or any questions to ask, or those first couple of meetings without having sort of a, here's what I'd like to talk to you about. Every personal meeting I have, I go in and I've got a little pad of Post-it notes, and I'm like, here are the 3 things that I'd love to talk to you about. And it takes a minute, but then it helps the person understand what the context is for the conversation you're about to have. I love it when I have networking conversations and the people that I'm talking to ask me at some point, what can I do for you? What is it that you need help with? And you may feel like you're the one who needs the help, but you'd be surprised sometimes at what people will need help with. And sometimes it's just, hey, I need to be better connected to the disability community. I need to have more entrepreneurs in my network. I need to be able to introduce entrepreneurs to other entrepreneurs. So always just try to ask, is there anything I can do for you? They may say nothing at the moment, but the fact that you've asked is really, really important. And I always, and this goes back to the question earlier, I always end every meeting with what's going to happen next. So, hey, let's talk again in 6 months. Or do you want to set up some regular calls like every couple of months, or just like have that, what's going to happen next? And just be really mindful of burning bridges within your own network. One of the things that I find I have a lot of people who reach out to me on LinkedIn, particularly saying, hey, I want an introduction because I'm looking for a job in this particular company. And I've had a couple of people who I've made introductions for, and then they have not shown up well. They've been obnoxious. They didn't have the skill set they said that they had. And it burned bridges. It made me look bad. So just be very thoughtful about how you think about your network, and not to be as generous as you can with your network, but also just be mindful of what do you know about the person and how they're going to show up. So just thinking about the long term. So I have loved this conversation and all the interactivity and the questions. I've got a couple of minutes for follow-up questions. And then anyone here is free to network with me on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Karen.
Awesome.
Karen, we have a question here. Jennifer, Paula, if it's okay, I'll read that question because Jennifer has put it in the chat.
Sure.
Yeah.
Since networking involves a lot of communication, any tips for those who struggle with verbal communication in an in-person event? For example, I'm autistic and sometimes can go nonverbal.
It's interesting. I'd love to hear from anyone else if you have either the same struggles, how you might handle that.
So I don't know particularly what it means to go nonverbal. Maybe Jennifer can offer some clarity to that. But I know that when I get overwhelmed or when it's just too much, I pick a task, whether it's, oh, I'm gonna go and grab a drink if it's a, in personal events, sometimes they have drinks or snacks or what have you, or I'm gonna go take a picture and check in because it's a form of networking, right? I'm checking in, I'm doing something social, and that kind of gives me a break from the socializing so I can kind of reset. But
Yeah.
see.
Tia, you have something to
Hi,
say?
I'm Tia. This is my son Trevor. And so we go as a team. And so Trevor is autistic. And if he has some verbal limitations that day due to stress or anxiety or whatever it might be, then I can step in and help with that. So having that team approach, I think really helps. We also have a job coach that goes with Trevor for different events, and that person can help facilitate the language barriers. And that helps. And then having also, as was discussed earlier, the elevator pitch, and Trevor knows what that is, and he can fall back to that and give a quick little statement, and then somebody else can follow up with that if need be. So that's how we handle the verbal limitations. And it seems to be well received and respected.
Awesome. And I think, Jennifer, not all have to be in-person events for networking. As Karen was mentioning, there's so many online opportunities where we can network, whether it is in the meetup groups or the LinkedIn's or a small group. So those opportunities is somewhere you can start by building your confidence.
I want to answer Kathy and Daniel's questions really quickly, and then unfortunately I'm going to have to drop. Kathy, one of the things is if people have offered to make introductions or to offer you opportunities, then take them up on that. But also just know that sometimes people are going to not respond, or they won't follow up on the things that they said they would do. And it isn't anything personal against you. It's a character flaw on their part. If they're not going to follow up, they shouldn't tell you they are. And so don't take it personally. Just know that sometimes people will sometimes not follow through on what they say they will. I always go in as an optimist, assuming that people are going to do what they say they're going to do. And so just, keep the spirits up, but understand that sometimes the reality isn't true. And I would say for me, I have something like 2,600 connections on LinkedIn, which is not the hugest number, but it's, 2,600 people I'm connected with. And I talk with maybe 100 of those throughout the course of a year in different connections. So it's what's right for you. It's the number of connections that you feel like you can personally manage that are useful for you. So don't feel obligated to go for thousands. Feel like you'll go for the number and the types of connections that are right for you. Arthi, thank you so much for the time. I hope everyone has a great rest of the week and so enjoyed the conversation.
It was a really very worthwhile conversation. Thank you so much, Karen, for taking the time. As always, great.
Thank you again.
Yes,
and
thank you.
And for anyone who wants to continue having these conversations, we invite you to go on the Learning Hub, where we can connect and keep chatting about networking and other things.
So let me put the link to the Learning Hub. It's learn.synergieswork.org. So for those who are new, can go in there and check it out.
All right, team.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Paula, Shlok, and everybody for tuning in. And if you have any other suggestions for topics that you would like to hear, just send us that information. You can reach Paula or us, you know where to find us. So here we are. Thank you. Take care.
Bye. Good
Bye,
seeing
guys.
everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Daniel.
Thank you.
I'll see your contact soon, Kimberly. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Have a good one.
Bye, Lamont.
Oh, Paula, real quick before we jump off, is Maria your sister?
Yeah, she's my twin sister.
Hey, Maria, good to meet you. I briefly heard about you.
You're on mute, Muff. I'm trying to get you to unmute. There you go.
Okay. Sorry I was late. but
No worries,
it
no worries.
was really interesting. I'm glad I made it.
Awesome.
Hopefully I
Awesome.
can make it to some others.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, no, we're really glad to have you, and I'm glad we finally got to meet you as well. And
Right.
hey, Lamont, I don't think we met before. How'd
We
you hear
have-
about Synergies?
I actually got the invite from Kimberly.
Oh,
Baker.
okay. Yep. Gotcha. Kimberly's awesome.
So yes,
Yeah.
so it's a pleasure meeting you all this morning.
Definitely, definitely. And what do you have a business right now? What do you do?
Well, like I said, willpreneur. I'm a real estate broker.
Oh,
I'm in
wow.
real estate, and I also so the play on words is real estate broker because I'm in a wheelchair, and I also co-own a home healthcare agency,
Oh, awesome. That's really cool.
and I just finished my first book.
So you're a busy man, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, I am a very busy man. Yeah. So that's why I'm really interested in learning ways to scale up and, just learn from other entrepreneurs that are in similar situations, i.e. a wheelchair.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
If you
Yeah.
want, we can definitely add you to our mailing list just so you can be in the loop on things like this without
Yes.
Kimberly having to forward it to you.
Please, I would love that. Would you like for me to just drop my email in the chat, or how would you like me to go about it?
So I think, did you register for this? I should have your email if you
I
registered.
did. Yeah, I did register.
Perfect. I got it there. I can add
Okay.
you to it. No problem.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, I'm
Alright.
getting ready to jump off, you guys. It was again a pleasure, and I look forward to again learning and growing with you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Lamont. Good to meet you
Bye,
too.
Lamont.
All right. Have a good one.
You good, Muff?
Yeah, I'm good. I just didn't want to pop off before everyone was.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
you're
we're
good, you're
good.
good.
I think we're gonna talk shop or
Yeah, I was just gonna check in, Paula, just
Yeah.
see how things went, how you felt, any questions.
I think it went really well. It was the intro okay, and the way
Yeah,
I
I thought the
managed the
intro was
meeting.
great. I think,
Okay.
you had the right amount of energy going into it. Everybody got pretty engaged very quickly. I think the handoff was good, so perfect job there.
Okay, awesome. That's great. I know the promotion side of things was a little wonky. I'll do better next time. I just haven't had
No,
it.
you're good. I think on our end, we were just so busy, and I was like, I'm 99% sure that even if we send this out like the morning of, we will get 20 people.
Yeah, we
And-
did okay, I think.
No, this was a great turnout. I think it was like, so you, me, Arti, you again, and then everybody else was, and then Karen. So I think we had 10 or 11 people who joined, which is good.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
and then we have the
makes me
recording as
feel
well. So we'll share that recording, and I'm sure plenty of people watch it. So perfect.
Yeah.
That went really well.
okay. Good. In
Um,
terms of the playbook, have you had a chance to look at this?
Haven't had a chance. Probably today I'll go through it and start filling things out. Just a quick update for next month. I'm going to be talking to John Battistoni about doing a workshop on public speaking.
Okay,
So
great.
I'll
I can
I'll check
connect
in
with him.
What was that?
Or I don't know if you wanted me to connect with him, because I know we talked about that being kind
Yeah,
of my.
let me first talk to him because I want to get a better idea of what he wants to talk about.
Mhm.
And then I think once we've kind of solidified that, we'll figure out some dates. And once we figure out the dates, then I'll pass it off to you, I think.
Okay, awesome. That sounds
'Cause
great.
I think with John,
And-
it's gonna be a little tricky just because it'll be right around Thanksgiving. So you might just bump it into like the beginning of December even.
Gotcha. One thing I wanted to connect with you about is like the back end sort of stuff. I know you typically like make the meetings, and I've done it on my own Zoom, but I don't have access to anything that's like the Synergies work, unlimited
Yeah.
Zoom. So
So I think on Zoom, we would probably want to be the ones like either RT or me can make the meeting. That's pretty straightforward.
okay, that's fine.
If you don't see it, like instead of you making it, might just be a matter of just reminding us like, hey, can you send me the meeting link or something like that?
Okay, and that's fine. I just didn't know how you wanted to handle it moving forward.
Yeah, just because I think we'd end up paying like $100 a year or something to have another Zoom account that can access that. So
Oh no, I didn't mean that. I just meant I didn't know how to access it or how to request it, whatever.
gotcha. Yeah, I think if you just ask us for that, that should be pretty straightforward. And then Moving forward, I think the only thing we might want to just make sure we do, because I always forget about it, is add the event to like the Learning Hub.
Okay,
Just so people see it on there, and I think like it gives them a little notification as well, so that would be good.
sure. I know that some of my missions changed, like on social and things like that.
Yeah, so we cleared out
I'm good to
everybody
go on
social.
the.
So social, don't worry about, but I think Learning Hub, you should still have the like admin permissions or whatever.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool beans.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome. So I'll be in the office a little bit later. I'm just gonna take a lunch break and then come back, and if anything for
worries,
the
all good.
playbook.
Yeah, just keep an eye out, like probably end of day today is I'll finish going through it, and then if I have any comments, I'll send you just like an email with it. That way you can just go through it all at once.
Sure. All
Yeah,
right.
but I think I
Yeah.
briefly skimmed over it last week after we worked on it, but I think it looked good. It just seemed like there's some blanks I need to fill in for you.
Awesome.
All right, sounds good.
Right. Bye.
All right, talk soon. Bye.